So, when we start to think about financing transnational climate risk reduction, we know that in the past we've typically worked with countries like this, country A, so a country with high direct climate risk. So think of this, again, in the GCF context, LDCs, SIDS, Africa. So we know that a lot of these countries have high direct climate risks, and maybe we should be focusing our adaptation finance on those actors. But by adding transnational climate impacts to the conversation, we start to wonder, are there another set of countries that maybe we should be worried about that we hadn't thought about in the past? Maybe there's a country with a high transnational risk, right? In the TCI index that Magnus and colleagues have produced, we found that some countries, like Belgium, for example, right, a very small economy that's very import dependent, might be very vulnerable to these sorts of transnational risks. Maybe they are deserving of some sort of adaptation support internationally to focus on these things. It also raises the question of where are those risks coming from? There is a producing country somewhere out there that has a link in a supply chain or a place where people are flowing from that are then leading risks to be absorbed in other places. And they might be doing this unwittingly, but those risks must be produced somewhere to then be consumed somewhere else. You might also have a country like this, which is adding resilience to the system. This is kind of an unexpected result of the work we've been doing. So there might be a country that, in the agricultural context, is producing more rather than less in a warmer world. So how do we deal with actors like that? And last but not least, there might be actors that operate at the systems level, so that kind of sit above this picture and are looking at this total supply chain and have an opportunity to intervene at a systems perspective rather than in a bilateral perspective. From a quantitative perspective, we've got a lot of work, including the ND Gain Index, on countries that have high direct exposure to climate risks. There are quite a few different approaches to this. ND Gain is one of the most popular ones. We've recently produced the TCI Index on countries that have high transboundary risk exposure, but at this point, nobody's really done any thinking about which countries may or may not be producing these risks. So we started to do a little bit of thinking about how those countries might go about being identified, and then from a policy perspective, what does this mean about how we should manage those risks?